There's a difference between aggression and unpredictability. And when it comes to NBA Youngboy, that line has been crossed more than once in ways that left the internet stunned and the courts involved. From hotel hallways to viral cell phone footage, there are moments where the Baton Rouge rapper didn't just react, he escalated without clear provocation. This video isn't about beefs with other rappers or battles over clout. This is about moments where violence landed on people even before the explanation did. These are 7 times Youngboy beat the shit out of people for no reason. Let's dive in. Hotel assault on his girlfriend. One of the earliest and most disturbing moments in NBA Youngboy's public history of violence came not on the stage, not in a street brawl, but inside a hotel room, and it was caught on camera. The incident dates back several years, and while Youngboy wasn't yet the chart-topping superstar he is now, he was already a major figure in hip-hop with a reputation for volatility. In 2018, surveillance footage and video clips began circulating online showing Youngboy in an altercation with a woman identified as his girlfriend at the time. The situation quickly went from tense to violent. In the clip, Youngboy is seen grabbing and forcefully slamming her to the ground, an action that ultimately led to legal trouble. This footage is not some blurred fan recording or hearsay from social media. It's documented and widely distributed footage, which is why it became part of the public case files and reporting about his arrest at the time. The video shows how unexpectedly and overwhelmingly the situation escalated. There was no crowd, no rival camp, no shootout, just Youngboy and the woman in what was reportedly a domestic setting. Legally, this moment mattered because it wasn't treated as a rumor. Charges were brought. Youngboy was arrested in relation to allegations including kidnapping and aggravated assault tied to this hotel incident. Prosecutors were prepared to pursue serious charges, and while the final legal outcome ended in a plea where some charges were reduced and Youngboy avoided significant jail time, the fact remains a major attack was captured on video and became part of legal proceedings. The cultural reaction at the time was predictable and divided. Some fans argued that the two were just playing around and pointed to comments from the woman denying harm. Others, including commentators outside hip-hop, called it what it was: unnecessary physical violence. Regardless of interpretation, the footage speaks for itself, and this incident marks one of the earliest widely circulated videos of Youngboy involved in an assault. But what makes this case a cornerstone for this topic isn't just that the fight happened, it's that the actions were completely unprovoked by anyone else's interference. There was no confrontation with another man, no staged conflict in public, no dispute over money or performance. This was internal, it was private, and yet it became public. This hotel moment set a precedent, not legally, but culturally, where Youngboy's response style was defined for many observers. Get physical before things are settled. Fans argued about whether it was playful or overreaction, but video evidence made it impossible to deny that there was a violent escalation with no visible external threat. What's more, this wasn't some late-night fan brawl where emotions run high. It was calm space turned violent in a split second, and that's exactly what made it shocking to outsiders and a defining point in conversations about Youngboy's temperament. It also showed how quickly Youngboy's life would be documented and dissected. In an age where nearly every altercation can become evidence, this footage lived on, influencing public perception and raising questions that his music hadn't yet answered. Was this a momentary lapse or the first sign of a pattern? Either way, this was one of the first times the world saw Youngboy in a violent situation that wasn't part of a beef with another artist, a diss track back and forth, or a planned confrontation. It was him directly, physically engaging with someone for reasons that were never fully clarified in public. From here, the pattern would only get more complex, more public, and in some cases, far more chaotic. Swinging on a fan. One of the most talked about moments where NBA Youngboy's reaction turned physical on camera came during a concert in Florence, South Carolina, back in late 2018. This wasn't just crowd chaos or a general brawl. There was a specific trigger that set off the escalation, and it was caught on video that later spread widely online and was reported by major music outlets like XXL. The clip shows Youngboy performing amidst a packed crowd when the energy suddenly shifts. As he's engaging with fans, someone in the front reaches up toward him and attempts to snatch his chain. Jewelry grabbing has long been one of the most dangerous interactions at concerts because it instantly threatens an artist's safety and perception of respect. In this case, the fans' grab wasn't gentle or accidental. It was aggressive enough that Youngboy visibly reacts.
Hey, the chain you just took out my partner neck, that ain't his chain. That's my chain. I ain't really tripping off this. I got too much money.
What makes this moment significant is that it happened during a performance in front of thousands of people and was widely shared online soon after. It wasn't a hypothetical argument that spiraled out of view. It was physical, public, and it reinforced the idea that Youngboy's instinct in a threatening situation was to fight back. Fans and critics alike debated the clip. Some argued that anyone would defend themselves if a stranger tried to grab their chain mid-show, especially in a crowd where danger feels amplified. Others pointed out that most artists don't respond with a direct swing. They rely on security, which is exactly what Youngboy's team attempted as. People jumped in. XXL's reporting on the incident confirms both the attempted grab and Youngboy's physical response, describing how the situation broke out as the crowd pressed in around him. This wasn't a random fan scuffle or a backstage fight. It was a direct escalation triggered by someone invading Youngboy's personal space and attempting to take something valuable from him. And on camera, there's no question about who threw the first punch. In the larger narrative of this video, this moment stands out because it's not just an unprovoked altercation in a hallway or a tense crowd situation. It's a fight, public, documented, and tied to a specific act of aggression where Youngboy's reaction became physical and the whole thing was caught on camera. And the next case would show that even when the situation is visibly innocent, Youngboy still tends to take things straight to hands with cameras rolling. The mall confrontation. One of the clearest examples of how quickly situations around NBA Youngboy can spiral, even without a clear trigger, happened during a public appearance at a mall where a routine outing instantly turned into chaos. Unlike rumors or secondhand stories, this moment is documented on video from multiple angles and remains widely available online. The clip shows Youngboy walking through a crowded mall, surrounded by security and members of his team. At first, it looks like a normal celebrity sighting. Fans are filming, phones are up, people are excited but not hostile. There's no visible argument, no aggressive fan rushing him, no confrontation unfolding. But within seconds, the energy shifts. Youngboy becomes visibly tense. Security tightens formation and voices rise. The situation doesn't turn violent on camera, but it gets close enough that viewers immediately recognize the warning signs. What stands out in this footage is not what happens, but how quickly it almost does. Youngboy appears agitated by the crowd, pressing in even though fans are mostly filming and calling his name. There's no weapon, no disrespect clearly audible, no physical provocation caught on video, yet his body language tells a familiar story. Shoulders tense, movements sharp, eyes locked on specific individuals as if deciding whether things need to get physical. Security intervenes just in time, physically blocking Youngboy from moving toward people in the crowd. In multiple frames, you can see guards pushing fans back while also restraining Youngboy's forward movement. This detail matters because it suggests they weren't just protecting him, they were preventing escalation. Online reaction to this clip was immediate and divided. Some fans argued the crowd was out of control and that Youngboy was simply overwhelmed. Others pointed out that this is something almost every major artist deals with, and most don't appear seconds away from swinging swinging on someone. What made this clip unsettling was how little it took for the situation to feel dangerous. There's also context here. By this point in his career, Youngboy already had a reputation. Fans weren't just reacting to the clip in isolation, they were connecting it to past incidents, the hotel assault footage, the legal trouble, the interviews where he discussed violence in his life. All of that made this moment feel less like bad luck and more like a pattern repeating itself in real time. Importantly, no punches were thrown in this video. That matters for accuracy. But the reason this moment belongs in this list is because it shows how close things routinely get, even in environments that shouldn't be volatile at all. A shopping mall isn't a show, it isn't a club, it isn't a hostile setting, and yet it took only seconds for security to realize they needed to intervene aggressively. People who work in artist security have commented on clips like this in general, explaining that when guards restrain the artist rather than the crowd, it's usually because they're worried about what the artist might do next. Watching the footage back, that interpretation doesn't feel far-fetched. This moment reinforced an uncomfortable truth. With Youngboy, violence doesn't always follow an argument. Sometimes it follows pressure, proximity, or perception. No clear enemy is required. Just the feeling of being crowded or disrespected can be enough to push things toward the edge. And while this time security stopped it, there would be other moments where things didn't de-escalate so cleanly. Moments where Youngboy's reactions became central to legal cases and headlines once again. Because when cameras aren't around and security isn't fast enough, the outcome tends to look very different. The Austin case. Long before NBA Youngboy was headlining tours or breaking streaming records, he was already dealing with the consequences of how quickly situations escalated around him. One of the most serious early examples happened in Austin, Texas in 2016, when what was described as a relatively minor altercation spiraled into a violent criminal case that nearly ended his career before it truly began. According to police reports and confirmed court documents, the incident started with a confrontation between Youngboy and two men outside a residence. There was no long-standing rap beef involved, no industry rivalry, and no public feud leading up to it. What authorities later described was a dispute that escalated rapidly, the kind of situation that, in most cases, ends with yelling or people walking away. Instead, it turned into gunfire. Police alleged that after the argument, Youngboy opened fire, striking two men. Both victims survived, but the injuries were serious enough for the case to be treated as attempted murder. News outlets in Texas covered the story extensively at the time, emphasizing Youngboy's age and the severity of the charges. This wasn't an arrest for possession or association. It was for direct, violent action.
Hey, get inside, get inside. Hey, get the hell inside, get the inside.
Local news footage showed police activity, mugshots, and reporters outlining the allegations in detail. What stood out in those reports was how quickly everything escalated. There was no drawn-out fight caught on video, no evidence presented publicly of a prolonged threat, just an argument that ended with bullets. For prosecutors, that speed mattered. It suggested impulse over calculation. Youngboy was arrested and held on a $200,000 bond, a massive amount for a teenager with no industry backing at the time. He eventually accepted a plea deal, pleading guilty to a lesser charge and receiving probation instead of decades behind bars. That decision likely saved his life and his career. But the case didn't disappear. It became part of his permanent legal history and a reference point every time his name showed up in later violent situations. What's crucial here is context. This wasn't fame pressure. This wasn't paparazzi. This wasn't fans swarming him. This was pre-fame Youngboy reacting to a dispute with extreme force. And when you line that up with later incidents, the hotel assault, the viral confrontations, the constant legal trouble, it paints a picture that's hard to ignore. Critics often argue that Youngboy's environment shaped him, and there's truth to that. But the environment alone doesn't explain why some people walk away from arguments while others escalate them to life or death situations. This case showed very early on that Youngboy's response to conflict leaned heavily toward violence, even when the situation didn't call for it. Fans who discovered him years later through music often had no idea this case existed. It wasn't part of his mainstream narrative yet, but industry insiders and law enforcement never forgot. about it. Each new incident wasn't viewed in isolation. It was viewed through the lens of Austin, where a simple argument almost turned fatal. And that's what makes this case so important in hindsight. It shows that the behavior people later labeled as unpredictable was actually consistent. The only thing that changed over time was the scale of attention and the number of cameras around him. By the time Youngboy became one of the most streamed rappers in the world, the warning signs had already been written into court records years earlier. Fame didn't create the volatility, it just amplified it. And when you step back and look at all these moments together, a pattern starts to emerge that's bigger than any single incident. Now let's look at a case where Youngboy nearly killed someone in a parking lot. The parking lot incident. One of the most circulated early clips showing NBA Youngboy actually striking someone on camera comes from a low-quality but widely reposted parking lot video that dates back to his pre-mainstream era. This wasn't a concert. It wasn't a controlled environment. It was a random public space where a verbal exchange turned physical in seconds. In the clip, Youngboy is seen standing with a small group of people when another man approaches and begins talking to him. There's no immediate fight stance, no weapon visible, and no crowd pushing things forward. There's no fight at first, but the verbal interaction is funny.
Man, you got all these.
Nobody holding
Man,
me.
you want to do something, do
Ain't
something.
nobody holding
You
me.
see him holding me.
Ain't nobody
What you
holding
want
me
to
though.
do?
Ain't nobody holding me though.
Man.
What makes this clip important is how fast it happens. There's no prolonged argument caught on camera, no build-up that would suggest an unavoidable fight. One moment is talking, the next moment is contact, which I can't show because that part was deleted forever. But when this became public, the clip spread so heavily on platforms like World Star and Instagram pages at the time. It reinforced the idea that Youngboy's fuse was extremely short. Fans who defended him argued that the goon must have disrespected him verbally or said something out of pocket just before the punch. That's possible, but it's also unproven. The clip doesn't show a threat. It doesn't show the other man swinging first. All it shows is Youngboy, them screaming at each other about to do something about it. That distinction matters, especially when the video is used as evidence of behavior rather than context. This moment didn't lead to a major legal case, but culturally, it mattered. It became one of those clips fans referenced whenever discussions about Youngboy's temper came up. It also contributed to the perception that with him, conversations don't stay conversations for long. And while this was still early in his career, the behavior shown here would repeat itself later, only with more cameras, more people, and higher stakes. The Lil Durk beef. The scariest thing about NBA Youngboy's biggest beefs isn't that they become trending topics. It's how often they start feeling like a countdown. And with Lil Durk, that tension didn't come from one argument or one viral moment. It came from months of music, subliminals, and fan bases, treating it like a scoreboard until it stopped sounding like rap and started sounding like a warning. The boiling point for a lot of people was when Youngboy dropped Bring the Hook, a record that immediately sparked backlash and debate because listeners said it took direct shots at King Von and O-Block. You don't need a blogger to tell you what he's doing either. The delivery is aggressive, the references are pointed, and the whole track carries the kind of energy that makes people ask, is this just music or is he really trying to light something up? What made this beef feel like it could actually turn physical is the context around it. At this point, fans were already hyper alert because of how connected everything seemed. The King Von situation, the camps, the online back and forth, and the way every new song got treated like a provocation instead of a release. So when Bring the Hook hit, it didn't just become a diss track to argue about. It became a moment where people started watching for real-world consequences. And Durk, at least publicly, didn't respond with a song right away, but media outlets reported that he appeared to respond on Instagram shortly after, and fans immediately interpreted it as him addressing Youngboy's record. That's how you know the tension is real. Even indirect posts get treated like shots fired. The reason this belongs in your video isn't because there's footage of them fighting. There isn't. It's because this is the kind of beef where everybody understands what the next step could be. When the language gets this direct and the stakes are tied to real losses and real pride, it doesn't take much for words to become action. Venues start making quiet decisions. Event organizers avoid booking both sides. Fans start treating public sightings like potential flashpoints. And with Youngboy specifically, the unease comes from what we've already seen. When tension rises, he doesn't always de-escalate. That's why this beef hits different. Not because it already turned physical on camera, but because it felt like the type that could, and one wrong place at the wrong time would have been enough to change everything. Youngboy's assault confession. Now let's talk about how YB is changing his life and music for the better. Bro is acknowledging his past and he's becoming a different person. All this violence he did in the past is slowly fading away. As NBA Youngboy's career climbed, part of the conversation around him wasn't just the incidents he'd been involved in, it was the way he and his music framed violence itself. Across years of interviews and media appearances, Youngboy has spoken about violence in ways that reveal a complex relationship with it. Sometimes defensive, sometimes reflective, and other times almost detached. What we do have on camera are real moments where Youngboy addresses violence in his music and how it figures into his life, and those moments help us understand why people interpret his actions the way they do. One such moment, not a direct confession to assault, but still a powerful and documented clip where Youngboy grapples with violence, is from an interview clip made available on YouTube where he says he regrets glorifying violence in his music. In this short interview segment, Youngboy reflects on how he used to rap about violence and things he'd seen or feared, admitting there's a darker side to it that he sometimes wishes he hadn't celebrated publicly. What stands out about this clip isn't fireworks and wild bravado, it's the tone and the context. Youngboy isn't hiding behind bravado, nor is he spinning tales of exaggerated heroics. Instead, he's acknowledging that the violence that appears in his lyrics has real implications, not just for his fans, but for how he's perceived by the world. This isn't a moment of saying, I'll hurt someone for disrespect. It's a moment of recognizing that violence in rap isn't entertainment to everyone, and that sometimes it carries a cost. In the world of hip-hop, artists often craft narratives around toughness, survival, and resilience. For some, violence becomes shorthand for respect or authenticity. Youngboy's rise in popularity in the mid to late 2010s was deeply tied to this vibe. Gritty lyrics, references to street life, and a delivery that made even his quietest verses feel intense. But in this interview clip, he's wrestling with that energy. He's acknowledging that glorifying violence, even artistically, can have consequences, and that it might feed expectations or behaviors he doesn't fully control.
Accept it or not, I ain't going back. I only get more groovy from here.
This is important for our topic because it doesn't excuse past incidents. It contextualizes them. For fans, critics, and even casual observers, hearing an artist admit that celebrating violence wasn't something he's proud of challenges the notion that these behaviors come from bravado alone. It suggests that there's an internal tension between the image and the reality of what he's lived and what he promotes. And that tension starts to help explain reactions in other real incidents. For example, when Youngboy was confronted by crowds or fans in public spaces, you see a performer who has wrestled with the idea of violence in his art suddenly facing the real-world implications of that imagery, where emotions, adrenaline, and perception collide. It also helps us see why fans can be so fiercely loyal even when these incidents get messy. They're not just following a rapper, they're following someone who openly discusses the struggle, the regrets, and the contradictions of life. That authenticity, even when uncomfortable, is part of what keeps people watching, listening, and talking. Youngboy talks about how violence has shaped his life and music, and how he wishes some parts of that narrative were different. That context makes some of his fans rethink the trend they were following years ago when they were young and their minds consumed everything they thought was cool. But violence isn't cool, lil goons. It's senseless. When you slow everything down and really look at these moments together, the pattern becomes hard to ignore. Different years, different places, different people, but the same outcome. Situations that didn't need to turn physical ended up going there anyway. Sometimes in seconds, sometimes with cameras rolling, sometimes without any clear threat at all. Beef, or no beef, fan or stranger, the escalation always felt close to the surface. For some people, these clips confirm what they believed all along. For others, they raise uncomfortable questions about impulse, pressure, and what happens when fame meets unresolved anger. Either way, the footage exists, and it tells a story that can't be brushed off as coincidence. And the wild part is, this isn't ancient history. These moments span his entire career, which means the story isn't really over. It's just paused until the next clip surfaces. Let me know what you think about Youngboy's life down in the comments. Thanks for watching this video. If you liked it, hit the like button, click on the cards displayed on your screen to see more awesome videos, and don't miss out on the next releases. See ya.